Over 2 decades of sales experience compressed into one podcast, which means that we're going to be getting into the mistakes you don't want to make, the best strategies that Monika has learned from turning around many of companies when it comes to their sales. But let's start at the beginning. So where did it all start 2 decades ago,
Oh, that was a
Monika?
long time ago.
It was.
So I started, I actually have a science degree. And after I graduated, I went into environmental consulting because I thought I want to use my biology degree. But I was really interested in business and I was doing a business degree at the same time. I started working for a company and I was meant to do environmental consulting, writing reports, environmental assessments reports. But the company was a small company and the owner had this program for companies to be certified that they're environmentally friendly, that they followed a bunch of standards. And so, but she wasn't doing a lot with that. It was an extra revenue stream. And I asked her, can I start doing cold calling for you? It seems really interesting for me to do that. I'd love that challenge to do it. And she was very surprised because she thought, well, who wants to do cold calling?
I imagine so.
And
I
that's
would be
really
as
how it
well.
started for me. So, I mean, because it was a small company, I had no support. She wasn't a salesperson. She was an engineer. And, but I went through these calls and I actually loved it because I figured out what I say, how I say things, the first sentence that I say, how I introduce myself, all of that made a difference. And so I started experimenting with that. And, because I enjoyed it, I thought, I want to get better at this. And I had applied to work for a company that was much larger. I wanted to get some proper sales training. And I got a job with a company that ADP, you may have heard of them. They're a very large Fortune 500 company. They're the largest in the US. I think they still are, but in payroll and human resource services. And they had a great sales training program. They sent me to New Jersey, and there were headhunters that were outside the doors with all these graduates that went through the sales training because the training was so good. And I went on and I had a career with them for 9 years. I was their top salesperson year after year. And then I went on to manage sales teams and sales leaders, had the top sales teams. And that's really where it started. And I built a career in sales and sales leadership, sales strategy and processes. And now I help companies. I provide consulting where I help them grow their businesses through sales structures. So yes, that's a long story, but it really started with that small little company trying to do cold calling. So yeah.
I imagine it's still quite shortened down. 2 decades, as you mentioned, is
Yes.
quite a
Yeah, for sure.
long time. I'm just baffled. Asking, like, freely asking to do
Yes.
cold
Yeah.
calling. Let me try to do that. Was it just a challenge, or did you know you wanted to do something
It was
else?
for me. It was one was the challenge. That was the biggest one. Um, and I was a pretty quiet child growing up, and I had people tell me, "Well, you can't do that. You can't be in business. You can't be in sales. You need to be more outgoing." And so I'm like, "No, I'm gonna prove them wrong." And but I really, I love interacting with people, and that was part of it as well. So I didn't see it as a challenge that demotivated me. It actually motivated me and drove me to figure out how can I do this and how can I do it well.
Yeah, that when people say you can't do that, tell a human they can't do something, or
Yeah,
they're not supposed to have something. They want to do it and they want to have it. There's
yeah,
no psychology
exactly.
that works better than that. And when it comes to sales, when I speak to people, they have many different definitions of sales. So what is sales in your eyes? If you had to define it
Yeah,
just really
sales
simple.
is really, to me, it's a combination of both an art and a science. The science behind it is the data. to figure out what works and what doesn't, and actually looking at the data, especially as you have larger companies. If you have companies that are multinational, the data really impacts a very large aspect, right, of systems and teams. But even in small companies, you can look at data to do some experiments and figure out what's working and what isn't. But then there's also the art of it, of that interaction that you have with somebody when you're talking to them, and the art of being to do that effectively. Not everybody can do it really well, and that comes down to someone's personality, their interpersonal skills, communication skills, and all of that. So a lot of that you can't, you can't really train, or it's difficult to train. You can train a big portion of it through time, but yeah. So to me, it really is, both the art and the science, combining that together.
Well, everything is an art to some extent. All of us might not be able to see the beauty. For example, I don't really see the beauty in cold calling. Oh, that one gets a little bit beyond me. But when you talk about data, like the first question that popped into my mind throughout your career, what is some of the things when it comes to the data that's the most important? That's like the crucial thing.
Well, there's a number. I don't know if there's one crucial thing, but throughout the whole sales process, you can look at data in every single step. And depending on the type of business and the stage of your business that you're at. So if you're a startup and you're just trying to generate revenue, your first revenue to get your company going, you look at data like the first interaction, right? The first contact. What I mean by that is, you're doing some marketing efforts, right? And how many of those efforts are actually effective of somebody responding to that and being interested, and for them to say, yes, I want to consider this organization, this service, or this product. But then, once you grow, you can look at other pieces of that, of, okay, what was actually effective, and how many interactions we have, what interactions are effective throughout that. What are we closing, not closing? And, all of that will have some impact in terms of, your win ratios, but also the type of clients that you're closing, the market that you're focusing on. So, I wouldn't say that there's one specific piece, but it really depends on what your goal is as a business and what stage of business you're at.
It sounds like we're supposed to basically capture everything, because everything is. So, there's probably a few things you shouldn't capture by the face of. You just made there. What are some of the things you see people value very highly then, and you shouldn't look at it at all? It's kind of useless nowadays.
Well, again, it comes down to what type of business you're in and what stage of your business you're in. So you really have to figure out what's important to you. Is it starting? Is it growing? Is it a certain product that you're focused on selling? With AI now, a lot of things now you can automate, and you can look to see which pieces make sense for you to automate. Even the interaction that you have, whether it's the initial interaction or the follow-up, you can automate a lot of that now. But there's parts of it where people still want to have people interaction, right? And so you want to make sure what's right. But you can, measure those pieces as well. You can look to see, okay, what can you automate and what's effective to automate? And you can look to see, are we actually getting better results because of the automation or worse results? And, start small with doing some A/B testing, and then from there, implement it if it's working for you.
I think most of the process can be in sales can actually be automated. Like the only really thing is the final part, the sales part. Like one of my good friends put it beautifully the other day when we were on a meeting. Like people want to look another person in the eye. When they're, for example, buying a car, they don't want to look at a robot. They want to look at another person in the eye and then make the decision, is this person
Yeah.
trustworthy and all of that good stuff. So, but right up until that point, you should be able to automate it, and technically it should bring better results if it's automated correctly, because the robot doesn't make mistakes like we do from time to time. Don't ask me to count to 305. I'm gonna
Yeah.
make some mistakes along the way, but ask any AI to do it, it's gonna do it in 2 seconds. Basically perfect.
Yeah,
So,
but even that interaction now we can fully automate. Not if you're in a car lot, like you're saying, and you have somebody that's there in person. But if it's online, like we are right now, virtually, you can actually have a sales call with a virtual agent. If it's a fairly basic product, you can do it, and you can do it well. I've heard some great calls where it's done better, actually, in some cases than a real person. But when you get into more complex products and services, you do want to have a person as part of that, right? When you get into products that involve multiple decision makers and stakeholders within that, and it's not a one call close, but you need multiple calls, then you do need a real person. So, and even if you can do the full call with AI, that's where you have to make the decision of, is that effective, right? And are your customers going to react positively to that? Or are they going to be okay with that? And again, you can go back to testing that. But yeah, you can pretty much automate most of the sales process now. And even when you do have that person on the call, there are still things on the back end that you can do to determine whether that real person interaction is actually effective. So what's that salesperson saying? How are they responding to questions and objections, right? What's their demeanor like and their tone? So all of those pieces you can measure through AI.
that's the nice thing about AI, is because it needs to have it in text,
Yes.
it writes down and notes down everything. Nothing gets missed. And whilst you were sitting there and speaking, when you were talking about virtual agents, that actually pops up with the camera and everything. I've seen a few of them as well. Thinking it might all of a sudden get into fashion to have no makeup on and messy hair and a beard that's kind of screwed up, because one thing, they always show up perfect. They look picture perfect. There's not a dot that's missed. So you kind of need to put the extra imperfection on yourself just to, I'm not automated. That might be the thing. But then the guys going to switch, and then we're all going to get confused.
I'm sure that you can set that up with AI as well, right?
Yeah, you should just go in on the back end and just make the hair a bit messy. I don't think it should be. If you're able to develop a virtual robot that actually listens, answers, does body language, I'm pretty sure you can mess a little bit around with the hair without too many of issues. At least I would be very surprised otherwise.
One of the things when we talk about what makes an effective sales call is you want to be presentable, right? And this is something I used to coach salespeople on. I used to have a coaching program in private equity where we buy a tech company every single week. And they'd come under my scope. We'd have sales strategy and sales process for any business, any industry in tech, in B2B. And part of the coaching was, are you presentable on video? How do you look? How do you sound on audio, right? So those are kind of the basics. And then from there, you move on to what are you actually saying? But being presentable is a big part of building trust and credibility for your business, right? So that may change, sure, down the road as all the calls are perfect now. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason that they look very presentable.
You definitely still should. You
Yes.
definitely still should. People judge you, and if you can't take care of yourself, how are you supposed to take care of
Yeah.
another person's company, for example? Not a person's marketing. If you can't even do the bare minimum of your own self-care, like, I doubt
Mhm.
people are going to trust you very much when it comes to very important things
Yes.
where details are important. But how did you actually get into, with the help of private equity, buying a type company a week? How does that come about? Was it just an idea you had sitting there, or
Well,
it kind of fell
I'd
into
say
your
it,
lap?
it fell into my lap. It wasn't my own company. It was someone else's company, but it fell into my lap. But it was also very competitive to get in. That company looked at the top 1% of hires globally, and this was before remote work was popular, before COVID. We had the largest fully remote company in the world, and we were hiring and training people how to work remotely. Um, but you know, so part of it was, going through some pretty competitive assessments to get into that kind of an environment. Um, but it was definitely interesting to be able to look at so many different companies and so many different industries, and then to really understand that you can sell really anything as long as you have the right process and the right strategy in place. You can do that at scale. So yeah, it was definitely interesting from that perspective to see that.
Because when you first, I was like, wait, what? A company a week? How do you even manage that? It must have been
Yeah,
very
I mean,
stressful. But you
yeah,
good processes.
to
It's like
manage it
that. So
effectively, you definitely need processes in place. It runs like an engine, right? Where um, sort of like the assembly line, right? But maybe not the best word for it. But where you've got very structured processes on, based on when it comes to sales, this part of this was the first call, right? And then you move from the first call to the follow-up call, and then you look at emails, and this is throughout the process. This is what you say. This is how often you interact. So, yeah, all of those pieces become really important. And then the data part of it, measuring what's working and what isn't, um, to make sure that you're getting the results. I mean, there's definitely tweaks depending on the product that you're selling, but overall, the strategy becomes very consistent from one product to the other. And the other part of it too is when you have a bunch of salespeople that your training becomes really important, right? The onboarding, the coaching, all of that. You really need to have structure in place to do it effectively at scale.
what do you actually prefer? Sales training or
Oh,
doing the
that's a
sales
hard
yourself?
part. I think now, because I've been at this for 2 decades, it's to do the coaching, but also to set up the strategy for a company and to see a company grow through the right structures and processes. Um, and those go across all of the pieces of a sales organization, whether it's the training and onboarding, whether it's the actual calls that are happening and coaching around that, and all of the steps of the sale. And when you do it the right way, it's amazing to see what the results are and how effective it is.
It is.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of both, so I can see the certification in both. I'm with you. I do enjoy training people more. It doesn't necessarily have to be sales. I haven't done sales training, but just that gratification of seeing another person grow is
Hmm.
a wonderful feeling. Uh, Well, you must have, with a tech company, we've seen that. I was about to say a million times, but over exaggeration does help the understanding after all. So we talked a little bit about like the strategy and with having so many case studies to some extent, what would you say is the part of the strategy that just, it doesn't matter what part of what industry you're in. It's just something you need to do.
So, there's a few things, but let me focus on the actual interaction, especially as we talk about AI, right, and how you can automate a lot of it. And when you've got that person-to-person interaction, I think there's a few things that you need to do to make sure that that interaction is effective. And the first one is preparation. And, I've seen a lot of salespeople, where they get on a call and they don't properly prepare for that. And if you're just reading a script or providing your same pitch to everyone that you speak to, it's not going to be effective. And especially nowadays, you want to make sure that you have a very personalized, customized interaction. And to do that, it really starts with preparation. And so the preparation is understanding the company that you're speaking to, understanding what they're selling, what their differentiator is, any news releases that they've had, but it's also the people that you're speaking to. So, and this doesn't take a lot of time, right? You can look up their information on LinkedIn, you can go on the company's website, and so that helps you get into the call of, first of all, building that rapport initially of, when you're doing introductions, an icebreaker, but it's, understanding who you're speaking to. But then it's later on in the call when you're presenting your product or service, if you understand their business and what their needs are and what their goals are of their company or that person that you're selling to, what their role is and their mandate is, then you can better position your product or service that you're selling. But if you don't do that preparation at the beginning, then you're going to lag through that. And if you're competing against another company that's in your industry and selling a similar service, and they've done their preparation, they're going to be at an advantage because of that. So I would say, preparation, it really starts there. The next piece during that interaction is underestimating objections. And some salespeople will see objections as hurdles. They freeze up. They don't know how to respond to those. They hope that, they can forget about them or give some generic answer. But it really is an opportunity to clarify, to build trust, to understand what the company is looking for, what that potential customer is looking for. And it's an opportunity to connect and to be able to clarify what you're providing as a service and, to understand whether whether the fit is right. That comes down to coaching your sales team to do that effectively. And some companies lack proper coaching programs or strategies to do that. So, they fail to provide feedback and really proper coaching. And so that leaves salespeople, repetitively doing things like missing objections or not handling them effectively. So, really having a proper coaching program. If you're going to hire and, spend all those resources recruiting and onboarding salespeople, you better make sure that you train them and coach them properly when they're there so that they understand your product and service, the value that it offers, and who your potential customers are.
I surprised you didn't say most companies. That's what my assumption is. Most companies is lacking proper sales training to their people. For some reason, they would rather just burn salary payments and leads instead of hiring a coach. That's when I first tried to dabble with doing commission sales for other people. I was like, why is nobody wanting to hire me when I just want to work on commission? Not thinking about what does each lead going to require. You might not close anything, so they might not pay you anything directly, but you still just burned 100 leads. That could have been 10 new clients, depending on whoever was on the phone besides me. Maybe. You never know. Sometimes you don't think of that kind of stuff. And, well, the people at the top of the company, they should think about that kind of stuff. How can we actually increase that conversion rate? And since you mentioned research, there's one question I got to ask you. Where's your favorite place to do research?
Research, I would say, like what I mentioned, LinkedIn, websites, but there is AI nowadays too that helps with that. It can actually compile all that data together. Some companies are putting resources to build that in-house, internally, to look at the pieces that are important. But I think the website and the LinkedIn profile are the easiest. Depending on if you're looking for other information that's important for your service, you may look at other places like Crunchbase, for example, that has a lot of good insights on a company. If you're looking at funding, what funding stage they're at, that's a good spot to look. And so I would say do that or leverage AI that can pull it all together for you really quickly, and that will save you some time.
When you say AI for research, I have actually not any experience with that. So is there a specific tool you would recommend that you use yourself?
I wouldn't say there's a specific tool. There's some new tools that are coming out. I wouldn't mention them yet because they're still in the early stages. And then, like I mentioned, there are companies that are building that themselves. This is for larger companies, but for smaller companies, expect to see some more tools available in the market that will be able to do that prep properly. It might be.
You never know. It might be tomorrow with how fast AI is moving. Just pops out of nowhere. Like, why was this a couple of months ago? I could really use this. And throughout your career, I imagine you've seen many of silly mistakes. Which is some of the mistakes you've seen people make in sales really stood out to you?
The biggest ones is not listening to what the customer is saying. So focused on, the salesperson is very focused on what they have to say, getting through all the steps of the sales call, but not really thinking about the customer. And, that's a huge thing, right? You will lose instant credibility if a customer has said something a few minutes ago, you didn't hear it, and you're asking them a question on that same thing. So that's active listening, and that's critical. The other one I would say is really being very structured in what you say. I've had some salespeople, and this is more the case with junior salespeople. And this is where AI can probably do a better job. Well, I know it can because I've seen it. But some junior salespeople, if they have a script and a pitch, they will just stick to that script. And they sound very robotic when they do that. And that ruins credibility right away, right? When you just sound very robotic, and AI can sound less robotic than a human, that's where you run into.
It's true.
But that's also linked with active listening, right? Really reading your customer, reading the situation, being able to respond and speak to what relates to them, and making it sound natural, and making sure that you understand what their needs are and what they're looking for.
Since you said active listening, I got to ask you one question. Because if I'm on, let's say, a non-video call, I'm very good at active listening because I can just sit like this and write notes. And I'll probably look down at the desk more than anything else, maybe even scribble a bit. Then I can do active listening because I can write it down and kind of repeat it to myself. But when I'm on a video call, I don't want to be sitting like this for 95% of the time. So how do you go about doing active listening on a video call?
Well, you can take notes. If you're not good at remembering everything, taking notes is a good way of doing that. You can do it the old school way, pen and paper, but that means you're looking down. The best way on a video call is have something open and, have it open so that it's centered somewhere so you're not looking, your eyes are moving too much on the screen. So that's probably the best way, is just have notes. Again, with AI, there are solutions that are coming out that will actually put some notes and some reminders for you throughout the call. It's still very early, but expect more of that as well to make it easier. But for now, the easiest is have something there where you can take notes.
Yeah, say that. I'm looking forward to the AI tool because I have quite a loud keyboard, as you can probably hear. You don't want that going off in the background of a video call. I personally hate that noise when I'm on a call. Like, listen to me. I would rather have people sit like that and write notes than hearing like that clickety clackety keyboard noise in the background.
There are tips for that as well. So there are, I don't know if that's the right word, but noise canceling keyboards. I have one of those. There's silent.
Yeah. There's definitely
yeah. You can also get a silent mouse, right? So all of those pieces, yeah, it's definitely a good best practice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely get yourself a silent keyboard if you're gonna take notes on any type of online calls where people can hear you. Pen and paper if you don't have if you have a keyboard like me. It's the old-fashioned way. And there is apparently some psychology behind you remember things a lot better if you write them down, because you just activate more of your brain. And I agree with that psychology. It definitely works on me, which is probably why I have stuck on writing a little bit of notes.
Yeah.
And one thing I always make sure to ask our guest is, the person that loved watching this got a bunch of value out of this chapter of Business Library. What would be the logical next step for them to take?
Logical next step would be, do some additional reading. There are some good books out there on sales. Get involved and stay up to date with what's happening with AI in sales. And, ask questions of people that have been in the industry, have been in the work for a while.
I'll make sure to actually leave a website that's good to check up on different AI tools for people down in the description, so you don't have to go and scour the whole internet. At least you have a place to start. And where is the best place
you can
for
reach
them
me
to
on
reach
LinkedIn.
you?
I'll provide you my link for that. Yeah, I also have a sales consulting firm, so I can provide the link. And the other piece I would say is I'm just launching a company. It's an AI-powered VP of sales platform. And we're offering a very basic playbook for anybody that wants to try it out. And we will have a more complex playbook as well. But that's a good place to start to build out sales processes if you need some support on that, either if you don't have a process, if you're going from a founder-led sales model to hiring salespeople, or you have salespeople, but you don't have any formal structure in place and everyone's doing their own thing. This is a good place to start to implement and have a playbook, sales playbook available for your company, and then work on implementing that. So, so that's another place that's a good resource for people.
I like that. And funny you mentioned strategy, because the same guy I talked that mentions the whole thing with that car dealership, he also approached the car dealership to buy a car. And you talked about structured sales process and people not doing their own thing. He got contacted by two different salespeople within an hour. Doesn't want me to buy the car. At this point, you're just annoying me, and I'm not gonna buy that out of principle because you're annoying me. You don't want to lose the sale to something that silly. And also, let us know down below in the comments if you want a specific episode about how to use AI for sales. I appreciate you very much for taking the time to come on the Business Library today, Monika. I had a really good time, learned a few good things. I'll definitely implement
Awesome.
into
Great.
my own
It's
business.
been fun. Thanks very much for having me.